Have I told you how much I hate the acceleration on this car?
Welcome to the first video in this series that I like to call Should You Buy This Car? Real car reviews by real everyday owners. In this series, I get with real car owners and ask them to share what they think someone else considering buying their car should know and hopefully give you real world insights from everyday people's experiences rather than your typical run-of-the-mill car review done by somebody who has only spent a few hours with the car. In this series, I want to help you answer the question, should you buy this car? Again, the goal of this series is to give you real-world car reviews from someone who has lived with said car and isn't necessarily a car reviewer looking to pick out every single tiny detail. To start off this series, we're going to review this 2018 Subaru Crosstrek, which is my wife's daily driver, and hopefully help you answer the question, should you buy a Subaru Crosstrek? So without further ado, I'm now going to have my wife share what she thinks to be the most important things you should know if you're considering buying a Subaru Crosstrek. Now, because my wife is not a car person, if you will, after she gives her thoughts and opinions, I'm also going to share my thoughts and opinions to give you guys more of a well-rounded car guy's perspective on this vehicle.
I think one of the great things about it is that you can get a lot of features and space for a good price. So if you have a lower budget, I think it's a good option because normally some of the features you get in the Crosstrek, when you go further up in packages, you would have to pay a lot more normally for other car brand options. But I think the drawback to that as well, though, is we've noticed there's a lot of cheaper material used, or they've cut corners. The quality is kind of questionable on certain things. Nothing that would make the car like dangerous to drive or anything, but things rattle a lot more or aren't quite aligned. We've noticed some of the plastics have been separating or like they become cloudy, and it's not that old. So just that's one thing to consider. Another thing is if acceleration power is something that's important to you, I really would kind of caution you about buying this car. I don't need it to throw me in the back seat, but I do like to be able to merge easily or get around people, and I really don't think this car has that in it. I always have trouble when I'm trying to get around people on the interstate. It just doesn't want to get up and go. So if there's a situation where I'm needing to zoom past someone because they're driving questionably, I struggle to do that in the Crosstrek. I also wanted to mention that while it doesn't bother me on short drives, the seat also makes my hips start to kind of ache and my back hurt. So I know that's a preference and like each person will have their own experience. But I did have a friend that they went and test drove a Crosstrek, and both of them said that they didn't end up buying the Crosstrek because the seat really hurt their backs, even just while test driving it. So I would say that's something to consider, that obviously you want to test drive any car that you are going to be buying, but I really think the Crosstrek is important to do that with for the seat purpose and making sure it's comfortable, but also, like I had said earlier, the acceleration, just making sure that that's not going to be an issue for you. And then a positive, though, is the gas mileage is really, really good on this car. So it's not a hybrid or anything, and it gets 31.5 miles per gallon, I think, right now, and that's with pretty much only city driving. We don't do a ton of interstate driving, and that includes when my husband drives it, who doesn't drive very economically. So would I recommend buying this car? I think it really depends on what you need, but while it's a fine car and it's adequate, it works, it gets me to work every day, I probably wouldn't buy it again personally, and would strongly advise people to go drive the car before buying, just to make sure that what they're wanting outweighs some of the cons that you do find in this car, like the acceleration.
Now, because my wife is not a car person or enthusiast, if you will, such as myself, I wanted to include my own thoughts and opinions of this car to give you, the viewer, a car guy's perspective versus someone who kind of just looks at cars as like a tool to get you from point A to point B. So the first thing I wanted to add is that I absolutely love how this car drives and how it handles. The steering is super tight, and around turns and twisty bits, this car is just such a joy to drive. You can whip this thing through corners, windy roads, and like I said, it's just so much fun. And on top of that, there is absolutely zero body roll in this car that I can feel. It honestly feels like a tight sports car with like a reinforced chassis. It just goes where you point it and it feels so stiff. This is a interesting comparison, but I thought this was worth mentioning. I really like how this car drives better than my 2023 Genesis G70, which is a sports sedan. My Genesis G70 has a crap ton of body roll in it that I can feel, and this SUV has none at all that I can feel. However, that's all dampened by how underpowered this car is. Like my wife mentioned, this car is painfully slow. Now I get it. Every car, it's not supposed to be a sports car, but this car, honestly, is just so slow that it should really be illegal. However, this car did get a power boost back in 2021, giving it an extra 30 horsepower up from 152 to 182, which is still not a lot at all. Now, I have not driven the new Crosstreks that have this 30 horsepower boost, and I imagine it might not be as slow as the older models prior, but I bet it is still feels super underpowered. I could be wrong, but you never know till you test drive one. I did want to add, though, that the 0 to 60 time for the 30 horsepower increased engine is 8 seconds. And that's, like I said, with the extra horsepower, and that's pretty dang slow. Now, I know we're not going for like quarter mile times here, but just like in terms of everyday driving and like interstate merging, whenever you need to like actually floor your car, 8 seconds is pretty freaking slow. Now, a not so negative ticket item worth mentioning is the off-road capabilities of this Crosstrek, which is initially why we bought this car. Several years ago, we moved to an area that gets a lot of snow, and based off family recommendation, got this car because they said theirs has never let them down in any kind of off-roading or, snow environment. So if you're someone who is looking at this car for its off-road capabilities, all-wheel drive system in this car is phenomenal. That's kind of what Subaru is known for. This car also has one of the highest ground clearances of any vehicle in its class, which is basically the ground clearance is how high the like bumper or bottom of the car is from the ground. So a lot of places that most cars would say bottom out, or say you're on a trail, it's going to give you more clearance so that you don't hit rocks or get stuck in the dirt or, get caught in the snow. So in terms of being a like wilderness off-road, like throw it through the dirt, utility car, it is extremely good for those purposes. Now, another thing I wanted to mention is the transmission. If you're buying a 2023 year model or older, you can opt for a manual or a CVT transmission. However, the manual option has been removed for 2024. Our car, which you're looking at here, is the 2018 year model and has the CVT transmission. I personally do not care for CVTs. It feels like a fake transmission. I can't stand them. Some of you might not care, but if you are concerned about the transmission of this car, we have not had a single issue with it. It behaves perfectly fine. Now, again, like I said, I personally cannot stand CVTs, and I have to have a real, 6-speed, 8-speed, whatever transmission in my car. But to the average person, it's going to drive like a normal car, and the average person probably won't even care. All right, so lastly, I wanted to mention two big negatives that I think you as the viewer should be aware of. And the first one is cheap build quality in this car, which is probably how you're able to get this car fully loaded, brand new for 2024, leather seats, all the latest tech and features for only $34,000. Yeah, you heard me right. 2024 year model, fully loaded for only $34,000. And that is a seriously tempting price. But as with all things, you kind of get what you pay for. Now, this Crosstrek being reviewed is a 2018 year model, so it's about 5 years old, and Subaru could have very well upped their game for their newer cars. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to base the following dialogue on our real world experiences owning this exact car. Now, that does not mean that all Crosstreks are going to have these issues, but there's the possibility. So again, I'm not saying that all Crosstreks are bad cars and that they're all going to fall apart. So back to the topic of cheap build quality. Everything inside this car has started to decay after only 5 years. The inside of the screen is like breaking apart or something. I don't know what's going on there. The trim around the gear shifter knob has started to delaminate, which I covered with the vinyl cutout just because it looked so daggone bad. I put a link to that piece, by the way, below if you're someone that has this car and you like it. Let's see what else. The glove box has started to rattle, which friggin' drives me up the wall. It doesn't do it all the time, but just enough to really annoy you. The leather in this car is also a very cheap leather. It is nowhere near the same leather quality that you're going to get in a BMW, Audi, or even a Genesis. I will say that after only 5 years, this car seems to be just totally starting to fall apart and literally just decay. So we are looking to sell it in the near future. But again, that's not to say that all Crosstreks are going to be poorly made as this one and have the same issues that this one has had. I don't want to be that person to say that every car from a car brand is terrible just based on one personal experience. Like, for example, a lot of people say BMWs are the most unreliable cars and break down all the time. Growing up, my parents, we owned several models of BMWs, and we never had a single issue with one of them. So that being said, I'm not going to say that all Subarus or even Crosstreks are bad just based off our one personal experience. Will we be buying another Subaru or Crosstrek? No, we just don't enjoy the car enough. And then based on our poor experience with the car, kind of rubbed us the wrong way, understandably. But all that being said, I'm not going to tell you if you should buy this car. End of the day, that's a personal decision. You got to go do your research, go on test drives, even watch other car reviews. Don't just watch my review. It's good to get different perspectives and then compare them. Now, before you click away, I wanted to get some feedback on what you think of this owner's review series. This is just the first episode, and this is my guinea pig, if you will. So for future videos in this series, are there certain questions that you would like for me to pose to the owner to have them talk about? What would you recommend I improve upon for future videos like this? Now, I also wanted to add that for future videos, I will not always be able to give a more in-depth personal review and perspective, as I did in this one since I own the car. Future videos are going to be more focused on what the owner of the car has to say. So again, any feedback or recommendations to improve upon the series will be much appreciated. And my aim and goal of the series is not necessarily for me to be your stereotypical car reviewer and go into depth and detail about everything. I really want these reviews to be more of, you get a personal angle of the perspective of the actual owner, rather than me telling you what you're going to be able to find in any other the car review video out there. There are tons of car review videos out there that are going to give you all the nitty-gritty details that you need. My aim of these videos is to not do that. As always, guys, thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful in your car buying journey and helped to provide you some good entertainment and insights. I will see you guys next time. Stay glousy, my friends.